Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mickey Boache. I use the he, him pronouns, and I'm a PhD candidate in environmental science, policy, and management here at Cal. Thank you all for making time to join in. Thank you all for making time to join in on this final day of the admissions fair. We'll be starting at around 12:05-ish to give time for everyone to make it into the webinar. Once again, I would like to thank you all for joining us on the panel where we'll be diving into our experiences on navigating graduate programs as minoritized students. Once again, my name is Mickey Boache. I use the he, him pronouns. I had my undergraduate degree from the University of Science and Technology in Ghana, Kumasi, where I studied renewable natural resources. Currently, I'm in the SPM program where I study species interaction with changing climates, specifically looking at plants in tropical environments. As a reminder, I would want you to know that there is live captioning available and the section is also being recorded. So as the questions can come up for you, please feel free to put them in the Q&A. It may not be possible for us to address all of the questions that you have, but you can always reach out to us at the Office of Graduate Diversity at graddiv@berkeley.edu. And then you can also reach out to any of our diversity and community fellows office hours, which the link would be put in the chat. Let me put that link in the chat as well. Yeah, so you can access that link here. Okay, so before we dive in, let's introduce our splendid panelists as they appear on the slides. I would want them to give their names, their pronouns, their undergraduate institutions, their current departments or program. So you can take it off from here.
Hello, everyone. My name is Danielle Perryman, and I use she, her pronouns. And I'm currently a PhD student in the Department of Environmental Science Policy Management. I'm a 6th year. I'm also a Black woman in STEM. So if you have any questions regarding that, then I'm happy to answer those. I'm also a Diversity and Community Fellow with the Office of Graduate Diversity.
Hello, everyone. My name is Elena Ojeda, and I am a 5th year PhD student in the Economics Department. I use the pronouns she, her, and my undergraduate degree is from Oklahoma City University and a master's degree in the University of Central Oklahoma. And I am also a woman in STEM and a Latina woman in economics, and also a Diversity and Community Fellow for the Office of Graduate Diversity.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Darrell Baca. I present as he, him. I'm in my 2nd and final year in the Masters of Social Welfare program. I received my bachelor's degree from Cal State East Bay. I majored in communications. My overall goals are anti-oppressive practice, adding diversity and inclusion to the mental health space, and promoting health, wellness, and sobriety for all. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Yasmin Graham. I use the she, her pronouns. I am currently a 5th year PhD student in the bioengineering department, which is a joint program between UC Berkeley and UCSF. For my undergrad, I went to the University of Maryland, Baltimore County and majored in mechanical engineering. My research currently is in the field of neural engineering and more specifically brain-computer interfaces.
Okay, so thank you all our special panelists and the diverse backgrounds you are bringing into this discussion. So before we set the ball rolling, I would want you all to talk to us about your background. You are here because you identify with being a minoritized student. So what does being a minoritized student mean to you? I don't know if you'd want to go in any particular order, but anyone can jump in.
Yeah, I can start. Like I mentioned briefly, I am a woman in economics, which is the minoritized group. And also I'm a woman of color. I identify as being Mexican American. I'm also a first generation student in both, undergraduate and now the graduate level. First in my family to go to college. I also come from a low income background. And so I think all of those intersect into who I am and how I navigate academia as a student. And, it's definitely been challenging in terms of, I don't fit the general mold of what graduate students traditionally have been. But it also, I think, is an exciting opportunity to bring your own perspectives and lived experiences into the work that you do as a graduate student, whether that's, at a master's level where you're going straight into a profession, or a PhD, which is what I'm doing, and more research focused. And I use it a lot, my experiences in guiding the research questions that I ask as an economist, and particularly, how they relate to monetary policy, especially because, when you look at the central bank in the US, a lot of the governors, a lot of the bank presidents are all male, or, I'm not identify as people of color. And so I see what I bring to the profession as being a minoritized student is I'm bringing my experiences into the research that I do, and hopefully trying to use that research to then impact monetary policy so that it really takes into consideration how it affects every single community that monetary policy touches, and also considers that into how we should use monetary policy to have, uplift every single community, not only specific groups.
I can jump in and go next. Are you okay with that, Mickey?
Yeah, that's fine. Feel free.
Awesome. I do appreciate what you shared, Elena. I think being a minoritized student is there's some positive things and there's some not so positive things. The not so positive is, finding people that share the same identity as you. I'm not saying it's impossible at UC Berkeley, but that shared perspective is a challenge. The positive things about being a minoritized student is the perspective that you bring in your research, the perspective that you bring in the statements in your lecture halls, how you use the intersections of your identity, right, to find ways to connect with people, if that's through volunteering, if that's through being a diversity and community fellow, if that's, being a graduate student, instructor, or researcher. There are definitely ways as a minoritized student to find a sense of belonging and connection.
Yeah, I agree with Darrell. As a Black woman in STEM, when I came into my PhD program, seemed very isolating and very daunting. And so I think the first thing that I did was, within my research, I'm not, unlike Elena, I'm not studying or pursuing anything that necessarily aligns with being minoritized, but I think in order to help me get through my program as a minoritized student, I sought out community and made sure that I built up relationships with other minoritized students so that as a group, we could get through our PhD programs. And so I think, yeah, for me, it's always been about community. And I think that's something that is ingrained in a lot of our cultural communities anyways. And so it's just that when you come to grad school, having that as an intention as well.
Yes, and I'll just echo a lot of what's been said already. It is a unique experience to be one of the minoritized groups in your department, but ultimately you got to your point in your whatever stage of your career that you are, because you're determined to change the academic space that you're entering. And I think for me, that has been a lot of motivation for continuing to go forward in those times when I was kind of scared. Like, do I belong here? Do I have a role in academia afterwards. What was compelling was the people who I knew were coming after me, and I knew we're going to enter a STEM field of some sort and wanted to be involved in this. And I'm like, I can't stop because someone else needs to see it too. So yeah, similar sentiments.
Yeah, thank you all. I think these are very insightful comments that you've shared. Most of the things that you've talked about also echo with me in that same direction. It's just that being a minoritized student, there are a whole lot of things that you go through, especially here at Cal. And I think finding a community where they are going to keep you grounded and then help you through your PhD program is one of the essential things that is really important. So yeah, these are very insightful comments. I think we would move on to another question that I have for you all. I would want you to describe what your experience has been like navigating programs so far. What obstacles have you experienced and how have you overcome them? So in no particular order, anybody can start and take us off.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and jump in. I think despite UC Berkeley being a predominantly white institution, and African Americans and Native Americans be, racially or ethnically the least represented on campus, I do know in my cohort, I'm the only African American male, and despite that stat, like I still feel a sense of belonging and connection at UC Berkeley. I feel fully supported by my faculty within my department. I feel fully supported about some of the connections I tried to make outside of the School of Social Welfare with the graduate diversity and other community, diversity community fellows. Obstacles that I have had to overcome is maybe like being, the only minority student in some of my classes, and I don't know if that's really an obstacle because like I said previous in my statement, I bring so much perspective when you are the only minoritized person in the room. But I don't know if I would really describe that as an obstacle, more of like a challenge. But despite, the racial makeup on campus, UC Berkeley is a very welcoming place. And 10 years from now, if you ask me about my graduate experience, I couldn't stop, saying great things about my master's program at UC Berkeley.
I think for me, an experience that has been unique is when I first started teaching, I would teach the undergraduate classes in, let's say, a lab course. And I would often be the only person of color there at all, and I happened to be teaching that class. So it was really kind of awkward and also a bit isolating because I'm thinking about all the undergraduates who got in here as undergrads, which is pretty difficult. And I'm just assuming they must be way smarter than me, and they see me as a student that can't do this or something like that. And that was just within myself, but it affected my teaching immensely. And over time, I've had to just convince myself that, hey, I got in here for some reason. Someone could easily take me out of this program if they thought I wasn't qualified, but they haven't done that. So I had to just keep reminding myself constantly that I'm supposed to be here. And I think that's getting over inferiority complex is something that you all have to navigate to when you get into space, but know that you're supposed to be here is what I would say.
Yeah, I think the two biggest obstacles that I faced, especially within my first year, was, as I mentioned, feeling isolated because I moved from the East Coast and I didn't know anybody in California or anybody at UC Berkeley. And the other one was imposter syndrome. And I think that ties into, again, moving from a well-known university, but not as prestigious as UC Berkeley, but then also moving from, at my undergrad institution, I had a cohort of friends who we were all in the same classes together. We did things together. We were all from minoritized groups. And I moved to UC Berkeley where I was by myself, one of the few Black students in any of my classes, sometimes the only female in some of my classes. And so it was really difficult to navigate that feeling of isolation and imposter syndrome. But I think touching on what Danielle said, you are here you got accepted because you were meant to be here. And I think that's the main thing, to don't ever let anyone or even yourself make you doubt that you're supposed to be here. You didn't get here by chance. They didn't flip a coin and pick your application. They picked you and they wanted you in their program. And so I think how I dealt with both imposter syndrome and isolation was finding community. And as graduate students, there are several graduate student organizations, both within individual departments, but also across the entire campus, such as the Diversity and Community Fellows. But I know that within the Graduate Assembly, there's the Graduate Women's Project, the Women of Color Project, Women of Color Initiative, Sexual Orientation Advocacy Group. So there are a lot of groups for student parents. There are a lot of organizations on campus aimed at building community for social, but also professional areas and workshops. So tapping into those early on is good, because you build up your community and you'll be with each other for the next, if they're in PhD programs, like 5 years. And how that helped with my imposter syndrome was that if I was talking to somebody and be like, oh my gosh, I'm really just struggling, I don't know, I want to quit, they'll encourage me to be like, no, we got this, we're going to get through this together. So finding that community is really important.
Yes, I will echo definitely what Yasmin just said about community. I think that was, for me, also one of the biggest obstacles I faced moving here. Because also, like, I came from Oklahoma, I didn't know anyone in the Bay Area or at Berkeley. And also, I started my PhD program in 2019. And so, spring 2020 is when we started, COVID began. And so like shutdowns started. And so we switched to virtual learning. And so once we came back in my 3rd year, we were back in person. I did tell myself, like, I need to find a community if I'm going to make it through, the next 3 years of the program. And so that's really what I did. And I specifically looked for communities on campus and off campus that, aligned with my background. And I felt comfortable sharing, about the things that I'm struggling with, both personally and academically. And, I've been very lucky in that I've found that community across like different groups on campus. Like the Women of Color Initiative that Yasmin alluded to. I also volunteer for the food pantry on campus. I have a group of other Latina women in the economics department that I meet with once a month to discuss, progress on our research. And I think those different communities have given me different things towards helping me, both feeling like I belong on campus and in, the graduate program, and then also helping me to navigate my own, academics and trying to finish my PhD. And then the other thing I would say is also, as a 1st generation student, really like navigating the hidden curriculum was something I struggled with, especially the 1st year. So, just a quick example, when I came in, I didn't know students were looking for research assistant positions like in the spring semester, way before the summer started. And so, by the time I started looking for GSRA positions closer to the summer, like they had all been filled. And so I wasn't able to find one. And so I didn't know that's how they worked. And until I started asking around, and some other my peers like knew right away, because they had been having discussions with faculty that they knew from before they started the program, with other students. Whereas like, I was just kind of stumbling around trying to figure out, how does this program work?
Yeah, thank you all. I think you've almost said everything. These are really thoughtful comments and feedback that you've given. I think to add to that, me personally, I also felt an isolation, coming all the way from Ghana here. I think at some point you begin to feel like, do you belong? And are there other groups that you could probably find on campus and associate with? So I think what really helped me was that I contacted a few students that I knew that were in upper levels, which like I contacted a few black students that were actually in the upper levels in my department. And then they actually directed me to certain clubs and then groups on campus that I could join, which was really, really helpful. And then outside of campus too, there were events like, running, hiking and all that, that also took my mind off academics a little bit. So I think finding a really strong community here on campus really helps you to navigate the academic space. And then also one thing that I also found issue with was with funding. Initially, I couldn't locate really the different funding opportunities on campus. But then one thing that helped me was that here in Berkeley, when you reach out to people, they are willing to help you find whatever you're looking for. So what I would say is that don't hesitate. Whenever you want something, reach out to people, and definitely someone would point you to the right direction on that. Yeah. Another question that I have for the panelists is that graduate school is an intellectually challenging experience. If you haven't already shared this, what are the things you do to take care of yourselves in order to persevere in your program, basically? Yeah.
I'll jump in here. So like I mentioned, like I strongly believe in giving back to the community. And so I volunteer both on and off campus. So like I mentioned earlier, like I volunteer at the UC Berkeley Basic Needs Center Food Pantry, a couple of hours every week, just restocking, the food that they offer for students and faculty and staff in need. And then I also volunteer at the Alcatraz Gardens about once a month. And so these are, two things that I enjoy doing. I'm a huge gardener and love plants. And so whenever I don't have to, be on campus doing work or, just in general, don't have to have some free time, I like to do things that are not related at all to academics. And so those are really like two things that I enjoy doing.
My suggestion is to figure out, what does self-care look like in your life? I know a lot of that can be contingent on your finances and, what you can afford and what you can't afford. But as a training social work practitioner, and as someone that's lived in a capitalistic society my whole life, like capitalism will ruin you if you don't find time for yourself. And I think sometimes we have trouble like identifying things that we can do. Like to me, what I define as self-care is a way to check out, to escape whatever triggers, whatever stressors you have. And sometimes for me, it's binge watching shows, where I go into that binge session and I'm frustrated, or I could feel my anxiety increasing, or my heart, and by the end, I forgot about what I was upset about. And I feel like that's a great way to escape, like, exercising, walking. I love Elena's, volunteering, anything that you notice that takes your thoughts away from what triggers unhealthy behavioral patterns is really beneficial to your experience as a graduate student, but then even further on as you immerse yourself in work in a capitalistic society. Find ways to identify what self-care is and practicing it, because that could be challenging as we become parents, maybe as we have companions, as we start volunteering and doing other things. Sometimes in the process, we forget about self. So that's my suggestion.
Yeah, I agree with Darrell and Elena. Those are really good. For me, in terms of self-care or things that I do outside of lab, I love photography. And so that's my thing. I will find a random event that's happening in the area and just bring my camera and go and take photos, or just go on a walk and take photos as I do that. I think another thing that I do to help preserve myself, I think is what the question said, was to stay connected with my I forgot the word, but like my group of people, my support system. So it is that when I get frustrated, the first people I call, my mom, my sister. And we sit and we have a long conversation about any and everything. How was your day? It was great. It was boring. It was bad. And if nothing else, that helps one to remove myself from my work, but then also times where I can talk to them about what I'm doing. And they're like, oh, wow, that's so cool. And it makes you shift your perspective of, yes, this is frustrating in the moment, but there's a reason why I'm here and a reason why I'm studying what I'm doing. And as much as I think I'm, if it's a moment where I think I'm failing or I'm not doing well, they give me this new perspective of, oh, wow, that's actually really cool. And you're doing really well and you're progressing really far in your program. So staying connected with your support system who don't have to be within your field, but can be there to be your cheerleaders and to give you a new perspective when you feel down or feel overwhelmed in any way.
Yes, and I'll just echo everything that's been said, but also add that, especially as a minoritized student, you might feel like you need to compensate the rest of your academic setting with your time, and you might want to volunteer for everything. You might want to find some opportunity to do an additional amount of research. Know that you don't have to do that. It can certainly add to your CV, but if it's to the point of taking away from your own mental health, then you need to learn where to draw a boundary for yourself. And I think that's one of the key lessons I've learned while being in this graduate program, is that I have to find some place to draw a boundary for myself so I can take the time to go exercise, run, or whatever I need to do, and not feel like I have to validate my own value by contributing more. At some point, the research will always be there. You can always come back to it in the future, but decide for yourself where you need to stop and just give yourself a break.
Okay, yeah, thank you all very much for sharing your experiences. I think we can probably go back to some of the obstacles that we talked about previously. I know Elena mentioned something about, looking for graduate student positions. Can we talk more about like some of the hidden curriculum, and so that prospective students would actually have an idea of how to navigate things like that?
I'll start here. For me, as far as finding funding and finding like GSI positions, it depends pretty heavily on your department. Nikki, you can probably also speak to this, the way we function. You kind of just have to apply to all of the graduate positions in the department and say, I want to do these top 5 and see what you get. Mind you, I've also bounced back and forth between being on a fellowship and also teaching. There's plenty of different funding opportunities you find through the Office of Graduate Diversity. There's funding externally, and lots of those funding packages will be available in November. So if you're applying for next year, probably start looking for funding opportunities right now. But yeah, as far as navigating teaching positions, they're open. You just have to be able to know where to look. And if you aren't sure where to look, then ask other students who are in the department already, or maybe even look outside your department if that's relevant too.
I will also add that depending on what program you're in, so for example, in economics, we're not assigned an advisor right away, like in a lot of the STEMs where you're assigned a lab. For me, like I didn't have an advisor until my 3rd year. And so again, like one of the things I didn't know right away was to like go to office hours with faculty and like start talking to them about things you're interested in, also how, it aligns with their research, and, and ask them if they're taking on new students to advise. And so, I didn't do much of that the first year that I started the program, which I wish I had, because it really would have helped me figure out much quickly who my advisor was going to be, or on my committee. And so I, for any students who are in a PhD program, specifically who don't get assigned an advisor right away, definitely attend those office hours, and both for like faculty that you're taking classes with that first year, and also faculty that you're not taking classes with. And also like start asking around to other students that are being advised by faculty on like how those interactions are going. You know, are they available for meetings? How, you know, how good is their feedback whenever they send, you know, a paper to them, or like whenever they have a research idea. These things all matter in the long run for you to be able to successfully finish your PhD. And so it's something that you have to start thinking about like right away. It's not, you know, you don't have to decide right away who your advisor is going to be, but having those conversations and getting a sense of like how the faculty work together or like can help you in your research is crucial as you move towards your completion of your program.
I think the doctoral students may have a little bit more value to add to the conversation for this particular question. But I know I get emails at my Berkeley email with graduate student instructor and graduate student research positions all the time. I'm at capacity with other commitments, so I can't participate, but I think UC Berkeley in terms of communication does an excellent job at making sure you know, and I mean, you definitely want to do your homework and put yourself out there and figure out what you can find out too. But sometimes it starts with just checking your email and see, you know, what's going on around the campus and what really applies to what you want to do.
Okay, yeah, thank you all. And also, I think one thing that I would also want to add is that it's good to join a lot of listservs on campus, because it's on these listservs that a lot of these opportunities are also posted. And then in addition to that, there's also there are avenues where you can also work with undergrads, so that in as much as they are learning how to conduct research, you are also you also have hands to help you with your research as well. Because me in particular, with the kind of research that I do, I really need a lot of hands. And if I had not come into contact with, you know, programs like the sponsored research for undergraduate programs, I think I would really have not made significant progress with my work as I had wanted to. So I think, as I mentioned earlier, ask around. People are willing to help. So if you throw your problem, you know, to people around on campus, they are going to direct you to resources that is eventually going to help you achieve that's going to help you advance your PhD. So yeah, that is that on that front. So I think right now, what I would want to do is to let us take some questions from the audience and try to answer as much as possible the questions that they've thrown already. I think we already have some questions in the chat. So I would go ahead and read some of them and then get your response from that. So one of the questions is that someone was asking, how has it been navigating interdepartmental dynamics? And do you feel supported by faculty, staff, peers, etc.? Anyone to jump in on that?
I would say that our department, environmental science, is pretty supportive, I would say. At the university level, maybe a little bit less, I feel a little bit less supported, but the Office of Graduate Diversity has been great in helping me feel more engaged at the university level. But our department, environmental science, has always been very, I don't want to say very supportive. The staff there are great.
So for me, my department is quite large. We are an interdisciplinary department, so a lot of our faculty members are co-advised or co-appointed. And so overall, the department is very supportive, but I think it is that you also have to, as you will learn, and maybe people have learned this within the undergrads, you will find that there are faculty members who are more of a champion and more support than others. And so it just involves interacting with staff, going to, departmental retreats and just seeing who shows up in what spaces and knowing who are more advocates and who you can reach out to more easily if you do need support beyond your direct advisor. And I think another thing from my department, and I think it's probably common across, well, I would say for my department, I don't know if it's common. We have our PI who's our, direct advisor, but then we also have general graduate advisors who are other faculty members within the department, but not related to our research at all. And the goal is just for you to connect with them a couple of times a year for them to see how you're doing. And so those conversations are less about how's your research going and more so how are you doing? And how are you doing in the PhD program? What are your next steps after your PhD program? So I think in that sense, my department is set up to not just let students have just the one interaction with their PI, which may be great or may be bad, but also for them to interact with other faculty members and get support outside of their lab. Yeah, and I think outside of that, peers in my department are great. We have a lot of fun. We support one another. Yeah.
So I only really can comment based off my experiences within the School of Social Welfare. And I happen to feel fully supported in my department. I guess an example I can use, my first year, I was very interested in meeting with our dean and, seeing who she was, what her background was, and how she could be of assistance to me as a student. And I think I sent an email and I had an appointment with her like within 3 days. So that's enough said right there where, honestly, it depends on your department. I don't know. I can't speak for the educational institution as a whole. I don't know what they're doing at the School of Public Health or what they're doing in the law program or at Haas School of Business. But I like to think that, there's a culture at the institution and there's a reputation for it to be like this mega hub of transfer of information. And I would imagine that other departments are doing the same thing. So I hope that helps.
So I'll just add in very quickly. I think in economics, the faculty themselves are all great people that, truly care about the students in the program. So, in economics, there's only about 120 PhD students. We don't have a master's program. And so we do in general have more of a, one-on-one interaction with faculty and on a pretty regular basis. But I will say, Berkeley is a public institution, and with that comes funding, potential funding issues. And so, as graduate students, our funding comes from very many places, whether that's fellowships directly tied from the university, outside fellowships, or they agree to hire you as a graduate student instructor or research assistant, and that's where your funding comes from. And so at least in economics, our department was for many years very severely underfunded. And so as graduate students, we felt that in like what our funding offers were. And so, for example, last year, we all organized together and we brought our concerns to the faculty and the chair of the department. And we said, we're struggling financially, gave examples of things, other PhD students were struggling with. And, we asked them, is there a way we can increase our funding? And, as I mentioned, as being coming from a low income background, that definitely affected me. It's part of the reason why I started going to the food pantry on campus and then, eventually started volunteering there as well. Thankfully, the department was responsive to our concerns, and they were willing to listen. And so I will say, if you apply to Berkeley and you're accepted, know that you also have a voice in shaping what your department does. And so, like I said, we brought up those financial concerns. The department now does full funding offers for every single graduate student, which they did not do before. So that was a huge win for us and for future PhD students. And so, now we're talking about other things that we can, work with the department to increase or make better for the experience for all graduate students and not just, certain groups. And so know that you have a voice and you can shape the direction that the department is taking, and don't be afraid to bring up issues that, the department might not see as being issues, like this funding thing. Like they didn't think it was a big deal that not everybody was fully funded, but then we showed them that, yes, this is a big deal, and it affects not only, who is able to come to Berkeley, but also who accepts those offers, or like, where else they might go. And also like the overall community, and like really bringing a more diverse group to Berkeley. We need to have, better funding for that. And so like, now we're working on like other things that we can also improve the department. It's like, we feel empowered, as graduate students to also make our voice heard.
And then also adding a little bit to what Danielle said for SPEM department, SPEM is very big. And one thing I've noticed is that if you need collaborators, if you need to collaborate with other professors and you write to them, at least from my experience, they are very responsive. And then even though sometimes they might not understand then in entirety what you really want to do, they would make time for you. You go there, you have a chat with them, and then they can even point you in specific directions, even if they can't collaborate with you. So I think the department in itself is very friendly. And then also, I remember we also wanted top up in our stipends, which we also had a discussion with the department, and then they also bumped our money up a little bit. So I think these and other things makes the department more supportive in terms of the faculty within the department. I think there's a comment, I think is for Elena. There's a first year generation college student. Someone says, someone talks about being a first year generation college student and then trying to get suggestions as to how they can better prepare for applying for grad school. Do you have any advice on that?
Sure. So for this, it will be very specific to your program that you're applying to, but know in advance, what's required to get into, whether you're applying just here at Berkeley or other programs, what's the minimum, and what does the ideal candidate have in terms of, academic background or research experience or work experience, and see how much of that you've already completed or that you can complete between, when you're applying to the program or when you're starting the program. And then, depending on how far along you are, if you're applying this cycle, I always tell the, students that I mentor sometimes as well, like, even if you don't have, research experience and you want to go into research, like also talk about like the research that you did for classes, because that also matters. When you're preparing your materials, it's, about highlighting you've worked through different aspects of the research process. And so, you can use your experience in classes on like how you've gone through those stages of the process as well. And then just also, figure out like, does funding, location, does all of that matter to you as you're applying to programs? And also really talk to other students in the program, especially, as being a first generation, like, just not knowing the hidden curriculum of the program that you're in, really talking to other students that are further along in the program and kind of figuring out like, what do they wish they had done much sooner? Like, so like I mentioned, talking to faculty much sooner into the program that I did, or, figuring out early on, like, how do I find, teaching positions or research positions, things like that. So, just create a list, the things that will make you successful in the program, and see like how much of those can you figure out how much information you need, and how much of that do you already have that you can, then put on your application.
Thanks, Elena. I think I have a question for all of you, like the panelists. So do you have any recommendations on how to discuss experiences with minoritization on PhD application in such a way that you don't become more like, a victim or something like that?
Maybe I can touch a little bit on that. I think you should be honest and authentic within your story and your journey. As I mentioned earlier, like using the intersections of your identity, who you are, and finding a way to promote yourself through that is a tactic that I definitely suggest you lean on. Don't shy away and don't look at it like you being a victim, I think that's the wrong way to think about it. And even if it does, you are you, and your voice is special and your story and experiences are special. And I wouldn't necessarily frame it as like victimization. I would frame it more like, this is what I bring to the table, and this is why I'm valuable as a PhD student at your university.
Yeah, I agree with Darrell. I think it is that our lived experiences inform who we are, how we got here, and the perspectives that we bring. And so I think in the application, that's the perspective that's how you need to approach the application itself is, this is who I am. How did I get here? In my instance, I was born in Jamaica and I moved here. So as an immigrant, my perspective on life and education is going to be different from somebody else. As a Black woman in STEM, my experiences are going to be different from somebody else. So in my application, I spoke about that. As an immigrant Black woman in STEM, this is what it's like. I said I was an anomaly in all of my classes. I didn't have a lot of people supporting me. And I just wrote about that because it brought me to the perspective that I had when I was applying to grad school. So I think taking ownership of this is who you are, not that you're a victim. It is that you are a minoritized student. That's who you are. So stating that and being proud of it and being like, this is how I got to where I am is the best way to put it. Also tell a story. Like, don't just, tell a story so that it's crafted in a way that's, if you currently think of it as a victim mindset, then maybe it isn't you're writing it in a victim mindset versus this is my lived experience. And so making sure that how you're writing it is saying it as a lived experience rather than in like one-stop shop. Oh, by the way, I'm Black. Moving on,
Okay. Thank you all for sharing your experiences. So I think one question would also be that, do many of grad students live off campus alone or with their families? And if so, how do you navigate, some of these things? Do you think it's harder to live near campus or it's harder to live further away? And what are your experiences with that?
Oh, sorry. Do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, sure, I can start. So I would say it's a mixture. There are people who live with family. There's some people who live off campus, on campus. So there's a wide breadth. I think for me, when I started off, I lived off campus and I've lived off campus for the entire duration of my PhD. And with that, my first couple of years, I had roommates that weren't graduate students. They were just members of the public. And so how I found that was at one of the, at Berkeley, there's something called Cal Rentals. And it's basically just a massive list of rooms that are for rent, or there are whole entire homes that are for rent. So you can use it to find apartments or studios or just general rooms, but you can also use it to find roommates if you do want to find graduate students who are roommates. And so I used that to help navigate finding housing off campus, especially because I didn't know anybody out here. But the school does also have graduate student housing on campus. I think what it all comes down to is your budget as well as your specific needs. Like, do you want to buy your own furniture, or do you want to use the furniture that the school provides? Do you have a budget for, like, what is your monthly rent that you can pay? The school, while it's, there's a lot of nice things associated with living on campus, you can find more inexpensive housing and safe housing options off campus. So it's just a matter of your preferences and your budget.
I answered a little bit in chat, but I live off campus and I also live with my family. I'm from the Bay Area and went to undergrad in San Jose. So, for example, when I did my master's program, right before this, I went out to Oklahoma because the cost of living was a bit substantially cheaper than it is out in California. And I came back here because I knew I had familial support in order to commute back and forth to campus. Now, that was my biggest reason for why I went to UC Berkeley, is just because the potential for living sustainably, because I live kind of close to campus. That said, there is a major BART line that I use to commute to campus every day when I do go to campus. And if you find some place along that BART line, you should be okay to find some place to live more expensively. Mind you, the commute just might be longer. But like Yasmin said, it's important to consider the budget and the stipend that you're realistically going to get and try to live within those means. If it means being a little bit further away from campus, then that's probably a good idea, so you can have money to have fun, enjoy yourself, and do other good things and you need to do.
Thank you, Yasmin and Danielle. I think one of the biggest benefits about being a student at UC Berkeley is the accessibility to financial resources. There is the Basic Needs Center, there's university housing. I constantly get emails within the School of Social Welfare about opportunities, scholarships, grants at UC Berkeley, but also out of UC Berkeley within the mental health space. So depending on your department, where you're a student at, there's funding there. So, really utilize the resources around you. And if you want to stay on campus, it may be a little bit more expensive. Not to say it's impossible, but you might have to do a little bit more work to find finances to offset that cost. But to what these two lovely ladies said, and I love that we have BART here in the Bay Area Rapid Transit, whoop, whoop. And because, guys, I'm from the Bay Area. I grew up in East Oakland, so I have a lot of family around here. So, it's obvious that, I can stay at my mom's guest bedroom or whatever. But for those of you guys that are coming from another place, just know that UC Berkeley is the bridge to a lot of financial help. So don't give up.
I wanted to also add, when it comes to transportation, there are a lot of buses that run very consistently around campus. And as graduate students, we do get free bus passes, not BART passes, but for the AC Transit buses. And that includes Trans Bay buses. So to go from Berkeley to UCSF, or to go from Berkeley to San Francisco, you can do that for free. So again, it's more so if you do live further from campus, is it near a bus line or, walkable in any way? I think those are some things you'd have to consider.
Okay, yeah, these are great comments and responses. So I think for the sake of time, I would ask one more question. And it relates to, how did you all decide that Berkeley was the right program for you? I know that, yeah. So how did you all decide that Berkeley was the right program for you amidst all the programs in the United States or probably in the world?
So I'll start this one off. So I ultimately chose to come to Berkeley because of the people who were here. Berkeley, besides having very high academic standards and being great faculty and academically producing in the top research journals, everybody is really nice, and that extends both to the faculty and also the other graduate students. When I came for a visit, I felt that this was really a big community, supportive community, And I was not looking for a department where I felt like it was always a competition, like who got the best grades or who published, first or the most. So I felt very supported here, and I really liked that versus, and then also, you have the Bay Area natural resources available are also a huge plus.
I chose UC Berkeley, one, because I'm from the Bay Area. I grew up in East Oakland, and it has a reputation of being a very prominent place, and the alumni association and all of the resources that I knew would be coming with. There were like over 400 applicants, and there were like 80 students chosen for my program. So it's like what, 8-9% acceptance rate. So all of that was there, and it was just like, it was an easy decision for me that this is kind of like where God and the universe wanted me to be.
For me, it was similar to Elena. When I came to my visit weekend, I felt supported and I felt, welcomed. And it was geographically, it was also a place I wanted to be. I very much, even from my undergrad, said I didn't want to stay local. And so for graduate school, I literally moved to the other side of the country because I'm from Maryland. So geographically, it was where I wanted to be. And I think when it came down to research, I think the main consideration was research, but also that my program has a rotation system or first year. So I didn't feel pressure to pick a PI immediately or pick the specific research that I wanted to do. It was that my department is set up to allow us to explore and to figure out over the first year what we wanted to do. And I appreciated that flexibility.
All right. Yeah, thank you all very much for sharing with us your insightful experiences here at Cal. So at this point, we'll be wrapping up. Thank you all again for attending. The Graduate Diversity Admissions Fair isn't over yet, so I hope you all join us again for tomorrow's plenary on navigating graduate school as minoritized students. If you have questions, don't forget that we as Graduate Diversity and Community Fellows are available to help, or you can reach out to the Office of Graduate Diversity at Graduate Admissions Team and the Graduate Admissions Team. You can contact us in the link that I'll be posting in the chat. And yeah, thank you all for coming to this section.